Hey, what's up? It's cute what if? This side. Today we will be seeing what if Deku was chosen by the Wolfwalkers. Before we move ahead with the FIC, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for future what ifs like this. Long ago, in medieval times, there were beings called Wolfwalkers. They could heal wounds and illnesses and could shift into wolves. The old saying explained that a wolfwalker was a wolf in sleep and a person when awake. When they slept, their spirit traveled into the wolf and inhabited that body. Wounds or scars on one form would appear on the other. If a wolf half suffered a mortal injury, the wolf spirit would return to the human body and leave the human with the injury unless someone healed them in time. No one knows exactly how wolfwalkers first came to be, but it was said that a bite could pass the gift along. When people learned of wolfwalkers, they feared them as witchcraft and hunted not only the wolfwalkers but their families and packs. The persecution forced wolfwalkers into deep forests, and over generations they were reduced to a bedtime legend. As towns advanced and people with quirks began to appear, some wolfwalkers hoped they could hide among powered people. That hope was shattered when one wolfwalker woman fell in love, married, and revealed her nature to her husband, turning him into a wolfwalker as well. He reacted by telling his family, and a violent feud erupted between the families. The conflict destroyed both sides, leaving their child the last of both bloodlines. The child grew up among wolves in the forest until, years later, he found someone to love. Many years later, Izuku Midoriya prepared to leave for school. He told his mother, Inko, that he was heading off and she asked him to be careful and to avoid getting too close to hero fights. Izuku reassured her that he would be careful, then left the house. On his way to school, Izuku paused to watch a clash between a hero and a villain. He could not help himself and began jotting observations in his hero analysis notebook number 13. After taking a few notes, he realized he was running late and hurried away. He arrived at his desk just in time and found a red spider lily placed in a black vase on his table. The class laughed. Bakugo entered and ridiculed Izuku, jeering that someone had left him a nice gift and implying it would likely be the only flowers he would ever receive. Izuku understood the message. Red spider lilies, though beautiful, are associated with death and are often left as tributes on graves. He recognized the gesture as a cruel threat meant to drive him away. The fourth time someone had left those flowers, he let out a quiet, weary sigh. The teacher began the lesson, and the day passed. After class, Izuku packed his things and started home when Bakugo and some of his friends waited for him. Bakugo stepped forward and demanded to know where Izuku thought he was going. Bakugo taunted that Izuku could only go home after he learned not to be better than him. Izuku limped home. Inside the apartment he found a note from his mother explaining she would not be home until later and that dinner was in the microwave. It was signed with love. He sighed, bandaged his injuries in the bathroom, and heated his meal. He told himself it was just another day. The next morning his alarm went off and he turned it off before getting ready for school. In the kitchen his mother was making breakfast and explained she had to work late the night before because they were short-staffed. She had prepared his favorite and asked what he wanted for dinner that night. He asked for a pork cutlet bowl. She told him to hurry or he would be late. He hugged her goodbye and ran out the door. At school the teacher talked about plans after middle school. Many students cheered at the idea of attending UA, but when the teacher asked whether Izuku still intended to go, the class laughed. Bakugo stepped in and declared that UA would never accept a quirkless student and told Izuku to give up. Izuku insisted that the rule banning quirkless students had been removed and that he might be the first quirkless hero. Bakugo sneered that Izuku would grow up to be a waste of space. The teacher cut them off and told the class to open their books to the assigned page. After class, as Izuku hurried to pack, Bakugo grabbed his hero analysis notebook and mocked his work as creepy. When Izuku demanded it back, Bakugo told him to go and get it. Bakugo detonated a small explosion that sent the notebook flying outside, then shoved Izuku by the collar, leaving him shaken. Before leaving, Bakugo taunted him cruelly and walked away. Izuku collected his things and went to retrieve his damaged notebook, only to find it had fallen into the koi pond, where fish had begun to pull at it. He apologized to the fish, recovered the notebook, and decided to take the long way home to clear his head. Walking on a bridge and lost in thought, Izuku noticed sludge oozing from his sewer drain. The sludge formed into a villain and declared that it was a lucky day for him. Izuku ran, desperate to avoid getting involved in a villain fight. He dashed down an alley, hoping he had escaped, but the villain reappeared and pursued him. The villain managed to overpower him, and Izuku lost consciousness. When he came to, he felt a slap and saw All Might standing over him, relieved that he had woken up. All Might had already signed Izuku's notebook and handed it back before saying he had to leave. Izuku grabbed All Might's leg as he prepared to depart, pleading for answers. All Might scolded him to get off, but when Izuku said he would be in danger if he let go, All Might relented and took him to a nearby rooftop. All Might admitted he did not have much time. Izuku apologized and asked the question that had been bothering him, whether a quirkless person could become a hero. All Might's form shifted and he revealed his true self, Toshinori, who sighed that he had hoped for more time. Toshinori entrusted his secret to Izuku, and Izuku promised to keep it safe. Toshinori explained that villains did not care about how powerful someone was. They attacked regardless and could cause serious harm. When asked directly if a quirkless person could be a hero, Toshinori said he did not believe it was possible, advising Izuku to consider realistic ways to help others, such as becoming a doctor or a police officer. With that, Toshinori walked away, leaving Izuku alone on the rooftop. Izuku went to the edge of the building, the idea of jumping crossing his mind, but he froze. Thinking of his mother and not wanting to make her cry, he decided in that moment to stay strong for her. Izuku headed home and found a note from his mother saying she had run out to grab groceries and would be back shortly. It was signed Love Mom. He sighed and waited in the living room. Some time later, Izuku grew worried when she still had not returned. It should not have taken this long, so he decided to look for her. On the way to the store where his mother should have been, he came upon the aftermath of a villain confrontation. The area was damaged, and amid the chaos he saw something he never expected. Izuku recognized his mother by her distinctive green hair even before he reached her. She had been caught in a violent attack and lay motionless. He screamed and ran to her, desperately searching for a pulse, but could not find one. Police officers tried to pull him back, and he fought and shouted at them to let him through. Before he could reach her, he felt a sudden blow to his arm and everything went black. When he regained consciousness, Izuku found himself in a hospital. A doctor entered and noted that he was awake. Izuku demanded to know where his mother was and whether she was all right. The doctor told Izuku to try to calm down and said that panicking would not help. Izuku insisted he needed to know if his mother would make it and reminded himself that she was one of the strongest people he knew. The doctor said he could not share details at that moment but added that someone had come to see him and left to fetch that person. The doctor returned with Detective Tsukachi, who introduced himself and said he needed to ask a few questions. Detective Tsukachi asked whether Izuku had any other family to contact. Izuku replied that it had always been just him and his mother and begged to know if she was okay, explaining that she was all he had left. Detective Tsukachi then delivered the devastating news that Izuku's mother had not survived. Izuku could not believe it. The detective explained that there had been a clash between Endeavor and an unknown villain and that Izuku's mother, along with others, had been caught in the crossfire. The doctors had done everything they could, but it had been too late. The detective expressed his condolences and, after confirming there was no other family to take Izuku in, said arrangements would have to be made for him to go into care. Overwhelmed with grief, Izuku cried and protested that the world treated people without quirks harshly and that he feared nobody would want him. The detective apologized but said there was nothing more he could do and that officers would come to his house to collect his belongings. After his release from the hospital, police officers took Izuku home so he could gather his things. He packed his notebooks, clothes, some of his mother's jewelry, important documents, his phone, photos, food, money, and many items related to All Might. In the end he had 3 bags and a backpack. He planned to sell the All Might memorabilia later to have some backup money, knowing he would need to hide it from others who might take it. The officers brought Izuku to an orphanage. At first the staff acted polite while the police were present, but once the officers left he was taken down to a basement and placed in a small room with a single window. The supervisor told him that this was where he would be staying and ordered him to be quiet for the rest of the day, reminding him that he had school the next day. Izuku replied that he understood, then let out a long sigh and lay down on the hard floor. He knew this might be only the beginning of hardships, but he still had a plan. The next morning, Izuku went to school while others ate. He carried his All Might items with him, intending to try to sell them before classes began. When I got to the pawn shop, they gave me a lot of money because many of the pieces were rare. Even though it was a lot, I hid the bag behind a bush before heading to school. At school I was met with whispers and laughter. When I went to my desk I saw the same red spider lily, but I noticed Kaken wasn't there and wondered why. I got through the day without breaking down. After school I retrieved the bag from behind the bush and walked to the orphanage. The caretakers did not react when I came in. I went to my small room and sat doing homework until they called me to do more chores. Izuku had been at the orphanage for a week and it was miserable. He was forced to do all the chores, and other children rummaged through his things and took them. They took almost half of his money and nearly all of his mother's jewelry. The only pieces he managed to keep were her ring and necklace. The workers did not help and accused him of hiding money that should be used for the children they favored. The other kids bullied and roughed him up, leaving fresh bruises and scars. At school, people learned that his mother had died and began saying things he did not want to hear. He wondered why life felt so unfair. A week later, while sitting at his desk alone, a few children approached him. Kaken had not shown up to school in about a week, and Izuku thought it might be because of his mother's funeral, which he had not been allowed to attend. The bullies taunted him, calling him a quirkless loser and saying his mother had died and that it was his fault. Their words blamed him for his mother's death, and he could not help but feel guilty. He kept thinking about how she had been out getting food for the dinner he had asked for and wondering if things would have been different. Some time after that, taking the long way back to the orphanage to delay going inside, he heard whimpering from the edge of the forest. Thinking it might be an animal in need, he went to investigate. There he found a huge white wolf with green eyes trapped in a bear trap, crying out and unable to free itself. He had never seen a wolf that large before and wondered if it had a growth or unusual quirk. As he approached slowly, the wolf gave a low growl. Izuku reassured the animal that he would not hurt it and that he only wanted to help. The wolf relaxed and lay down, as if it understood. He moved carefully to the trap and managed to pull it open. The wolf made a sharp sound but did not attack. After freeing the creature, Izuku took bandages from his bag and wrapped the wolf's injured leg. The wolf watched him with an intelligent gaze and then wagged its tail, a clear sign of thanks. Izuku told the wolf to be more careful next time. A howl answered from deeper in the trees. Izuku turned to see a second, much larger wolf, dark brown with black mixed through its fur and purple eyes, charging toward him. The brown wolf lunged and bit his arm. The white wolf sprang between them and bit the brown wolf to defend him. The two wolves faced one another until the brown one looked guilty and retreated, then ran off into the trees. The white wolf came back to check on Izuku. He tried to reassure the animal that he was fine, that the bite was not serious, and that he needed to get going because he did not know how long he had before the orphanage would be worried. As he spoke, the wolf watched him, and then disappeared into the forest. He bandaged his arm where the bite had been and walked back toward the orphanage, worrying about the consequences of being late. When he entered the orphanage, the caretaker demanded to know where he had been. Izuku explained that he had been delayed while walking back. The caretaker accused him of being late, said he should have been back 30 minutes earlier, and told him he had chores to do and would have to cook dinner for everyone. Before Izuku could respond, the caretaker struck him and scolded him harshly, telling him that no one would want to adopt a child like him. After the reprimand, the caretaker ordered that he could not eat or sleep until all his chores were finished. Izuku nodded and limped to the bathroom. Somewhere in the forest, two voices spoke. One voice apologized. The other voice, addressing someone named Xylo, warned that Xylo had bitten the boy and that the boy would now begin to change into one of them, scolding Xylo for repeating the mistake. Xylo answered that he had forgotten. Cal admitted that he had seen the boy hurt and had let his instincts take over. Xylo warned that, because of that, they now had another Wolfwalker who would not understand what was happening to him and would be alone with powers he could not explain. Cal insisted everything would work out and suggested the boy might think the change was part of a quirk and could be helped by his loved ones. Xylo argued that Cal had bitten an orphan and that the orphanage where the boy lived seemed abusive. When Xylo asked how Cal knew, Cal said the boy had told him and had sounded frightened and upset when speaking about the orphanage. Cal said the boy would need their help and reminded Xylo that they had always wanted another child. Xylo reminded Cal how painful it had been to take in a child before and asked if he remembered what had happened to Ricardo and Lychee. Cal answered that he did remember and that, while those losses had been devastating, they had also had the happiest times of their lives with those children. Ricardo had lived a long, happy life and had a family they could still visit. Lychee had become a hunter and what had happened to him was not their fault. Cal insisted the new child needed them and that, if Xylo would not take responsibility for his actions, Cal would. Xylo admitted he hated being proved right and worried about the boy turning out like his father. Cal decided to send Banjo to keep an eye on the boy while he prepared a room and said the child would not stay in the woods with Xylo. Xylo begged Cal to be careful because he did not want to lose him. Cal promised he would not be lost. Elsewhere, Izuku cleaned around the orphanage without noticing a dark green bird that watched him from a distance. Izuku had not slept much the night before because of the work the orphanage required of him. He had been forced to clean until late, and when he finally lay down he had experienced a strange dream and a strange sensation. When he closed his eyes he thought he saw a yellow gold light and felt as if his soul were leaving his body, but when he opened his eyes there had been nothing. He had not slept that night and had to attend school the next day. He hoped he would not have to deal with anyone while he was exhausted. He walked to school and, as usual, people began to whisper and laugh. He was too tired to pay attention and ignored them. He sat at his desk trying to stay awake. It was the last day of middle school, and he told himself it should not matter. He did not listen to the teacher and barely noticed the classroom until the bell rang. As he gathered his things, someone pushed him back down. He looked up to see Kaken. Bakugo taunted him, calling him useless and making bitter comments about his status as an orphan. Bakugo noted that he had not seen Izuku at the funeral and suggested he had been to blame for his mother's death. Izuku asked him to stop, but Bakugo continued, claiming he had heard that Izuku had killed his mother and that she had died because she could not deal with him. Izuku reached a breaking point. He slammed his hands on the desk and, in a sudden motion, grabbed Bakugo by the shirt and shoved him aside. The change in Izuku startled everyone. His eyes glowed green, his nails lengthened into claw-like points, and his teeth took on a sharper aspect. A low, unfamiliar growl came from him, and he moved with a fierce, wild intensity that made the classroom fall silent. Izuku struck Bakugo with a powerful, controlled motion that knocked him back and left a raw, visible mark across Bakugo's cheek, an abrupt, shocking reminder of how serious the situation had become without any graphic detail. Izuku told Bakugo that no one understood what had happened that night and that the event had changed him. He warned Bakugo to stay away and declared that he would not allow anyone to speak of his mother in that way again. Then he grabbed his belongings and left, moving as if he had not even been there. Bakugo stood frozen for a few minutes and then asked aloud what had just happened. When Izuku left school, he felt a strange mix of freedom and confusion. He could not remember all of what had occurred and wondered if he had blacked out. One moment he had been drowsy at his desk, and the next he had been walking away with a stunned Bakugo behind him. As he walked back to the orphanage, he noticed the dark green bird following and watching him. He considered that it might need help. He had heard animals seem to seek out people in need before and turned to follow it. Soon enough the bird showed Izuku a nest on the ground next to a tree. The nest held several eggs. Izuku thought that this must be the bird's nest and those must be its eggs. Izuku asked whether the nest was the bird's. The bird looked at him, shook its head, and then gestured that it wanted help. Izuku understood that the bird understood him. Izuku asked if the nest had fallen. The bird nodded and indicated that it wanted him to put the nest back. Izuku thought it was risky to try while he was so tired. He did not want to break the eggs. The bird kept looking at him insistently. Izuku decided he should try to help. Izuku carefully picked up the nest and began to climb the tree. He found climbing easier than he expected and managed to place the nest back where it likely had been. The next problem was getting down. As he climbed down, Izuku blacked out for a second and nearly let go of the trunk. He panicked, grabbed on, and slid down, grateful to have avoided a fall. When he looked back, he noticed claw marks where he had just slid and felt confused. His nails looked normal. Izuku thought he must be more out of it than he believed, because those marks could not have been his. The bird chirped happily and Izuku smiled. He told the bird that he was glad to have helped but that he needed to go. The bird nodded as Izuku waved goodbye and headed back to the orphanage, hoping he could get some sleep before another day of chores. After arriving at the orphanage, Izuku was forced to watch the children while the workers slacked off. Many of the kids disliked him because he was quirkless and assumed that made him useless. He had to manage unruly children, break up scuffles, and deal with kids using their quirks in chaotic ways. In the end, he was so exhausted that he mostly let things pass to avoid the children reporting him to the staff and risking punishment. Later, after doing the work the staff should have been doing, Izuku finally went to bed. He lay down and closed his eyes, hoping for sleep. When he slipped into a deep sleep, a familiar yellow, golden glow appeared. When he opened his eyes, he found himself awake and, to his confusion, looking at his own sleeping body. He panicked and made noise, which drew a distant question from one of the caretakers. Izuku thought he must be having a quirk manifest. He worried that the caretakers were coming and that he needed to hide before they discovered him in this state. As he looked around for a place to hide, he heard tapping at the window. A dark green bird perched there, looking at him and urging him to get out. Realizing he could escape through the window, Izuku managed to climb to it, open it, and slip out just before the caretakers entered the room. He peered back once and saw them look around before leaving. He exhaled, then began to panic again, wondering if his experience was a late-blooming quirk. Something then tapped the top of his head. Izuku recognized the bird he had helped earlier. The bird fluttered around him and clearly wanted him to follow. Izuku told the bird to wait a moment while he tried to figure out what had happened and what kind of animal he might be. The bird tapped his head again and insisted that he follow. He followed the bird into the woods. At first he wondered if the bird simply needed help again, but as he went deeper he caught a familiar scent. A yellow glow seemed to lead him toward it, and a sense urged him to follow. The bird flew ahead, making sure he stayed on the right path. When the scent grew stronger, he knew he was close. The scent led him to a hidden cave he had never seen before. The bird stopped at the cave entrance, looked at him, and then flew inside. Izuku followed and bumped into something. When he looked up, he saw the same wolf he had saved earlier. The wolf greeted him and welcomed him as the new Wolfwalker, saying he had been expecting Izuku. The wolf introduced himself as Cal and offered to explain. He suggested they wait for someone together and encouraged Izuku to ask questions, noting how confused he seemed. Izuku wondered if this was real or a dream and asked who Cal was and what being a Wolfwalker meant. Cal explained that his name was Cal and that Izuku was the new Wolfwalker. Now I knew the reader would want an explanation, but I had to wait until someone else was here to tell me everything that had happened to make me like this. I asked if the word was Wolfwalker. Cal told me to just follow him. The huge white wolf, which I guessed was named Cal, led me to a beautiful chamber deeper in the cave. A waterfall spilled into a clear pool. Cal stopped at the rim of the water and told me to look into it and say what I saw. I obeyed and saw my reflection as a black wolf with bright green eyes. I was shocked and turned toward the other wolf, which was about twice my size. I asked if that was me. Cal confirmed that it was and reassured me that everything would be explained, then pointed out someone entering the cave. Footsteps and new scents filled the air as more wolves came in. Cal urged me to follow and reassured me that the wolves would not hurt me, though they would be curious. My mind raced at the thought of so many wolves. I followed Cal to the main chamber. There were many large wolves there, but one stood out, the one that had bitten me earlier before Cal stepped in. Cal called for Xylo and scolded him for leaving the cave. Xylo apologized, saying he had only gone for a run with the other wolves. The big dark brown wolf with purple eyes turned toward me in surprise and asked if I was the one Cal had brought. Cal confirmed that I was and said he could finally explain everything now that we were all present. Two large wolves sat side by side. Other wolves, smaller only in comparison to those two but still large, watched me with curious eyes. My nerves tightened as they regarded me, but I trusted Cal when he said they would not attack. Cal began the explanation and pointed at Xylo, calling him the cause of my transformation. Xylo admitted he was sorry. I asked what he meant. Xylo explained that when a Wolfwalker bit someone, that person could become a Wolfwalker too, and that he had bitten me and changed me. He added that he could reverse it if I wanted. I asked for clarification. Xylo confirmed that only the wolf who had bitten me could fix it. Cal emphasized that the choice was mine. I asked what would happen if I chose to stay a Wolfwalker. Cal said nothing bad would happen. They would take me in, teach me what I needed to know, and if I wanted them as a family, they could become my family. I said I would really like that option, and explained that I was quirkless. Cal said he knew and that he was aware of how people treated someone without powers in this world. Xylo objected to Cal's tone and insisted that being powerless did not make someone useless. Cal replied that society did not always see it that way, that people with weak or villainous quirks could be bullied or hurt, and that those born without powers often fared the worst. Xylo reacted with anger at how messed up the world was and wished things had been different when quirks did not matter as much. Cal said he did not know why things had changed, but that if I wanted to remain a Wolfwalker they would teach me. I thanked them and asked Xylo to explain more about what a Wolfwalker was. Xylo described Wolfwalkers as creatures of ancient tales, people by day and wolves by night. Cal summarized the saying, "You are a wolf when you sleep, a person when you are awake." I asked if my human body was asleep right now. Xylo confirmed that it was and explained that when I was ready to wake, the wolves could tap my body with their paws to bring my spirit back into it. I asked how I would get back home. I explained I had been following a bird that led me here. Cal promised that the bird, Banjo, would lead me back. When I asked who Banjo was, Cal said it was the bird I had been following. With that settled, Xylo proposed starting my training immediately and told me to follow him, saying there was much to do and little time. Xylo led me outside with Cal a short distance behind. Xylo said he needed to know my name, though Cal already knew it. I told him my name was Izuku Midoriya. Xylo said it was nice to meet me and asked if he could call me Izuku, explaining that he was used to using first names. I agreed. Xylo then suggested beginning with the basics. He asked me to close my eyes and describe what I could hear and smell. I followed his directions and relaxed, at first unsure of what he wanted. I told him I thought I could hear his voice. Xylo explained that I did not need my eyes to be one with nature. He said that with my new senses I could perceive everything in the forest. I could sense movement through the ground, hear through my paws, and catch scents on the wind. I realized I could picture everything in my head without sight and felt a rush of amazement. Xylo pointed out that having 4 legs meant I could run fast and jump high, and with training I could learn to land like a cat. He offered to show me how magical the woods were. Xylo then howled, and the other wolves answered as they emerged. Cal told me they were going for a run. The pack set off, and I lagged behind for a moment before calling for them to wait. As we ran, I could hardly believe how fast I was moving. It was amazing. Cal told Izuku to keep his nose down and become a wolf. Izuku followed Cal's lead, catching up to the others by leaping across logs and up onto high ledges. For the first time in a long while he felt free and unafraid. They ran with the whole pack, and Izuku saw sights he never would have noticed before. Xylo said that at night they became one with nature. They ran on until they reached a cliffside. Izuku stopped at the edge while everyone else leapt over it. The view was breathtaking. Cal and Xylo looked back to encourage him. Cal reassured Izuku that he could do it and that it had been scary the first time for him too, but Izuku would be all right. Izuku nodded, ran back to gain momentum, and jumped. He made it across, but Cal had to catch him at the end. Izuku thanked Cal, and the group continued running until Xylo stopped at a large puddle and splashed Cal. They all laughed and began splashing around. Rain started to fall, but it felt wonderful against Izuku's wolf body. They played in the rain until it eased, then ran to a cliff where the full moon hung overhead. The pack howled at the moon before heading back. Izuku expressed his gratitude, and Cal told him there was still more to learn that night. Later, Cal asked Izuku how it had felt to be a Wolfwalker for the first time. Izuku said it had been amazing. Cal admitted that his first transformation had felt magical as well. Izuku asked if Cal had been turned to or born a Wolfwalker. Cal explained that he had been turned by Xylo, just as Izuku had been. Izuku then asked if Cal would share his story about becoming a Wolfwalker. Xylo warned that the tale might be nerve-wracking. Cal suggested they postpone. His past was personal and Izuku was still learning. Xylo said he would also withhold his own story until Cal felt ready. He then encouraged Izuku to share his own past if he was comfortable. Izuku sighed and began to speak. He said that when he was born his mother had been the only person he really knew. His father had gone overseas for work. He had a best friend he called Kaken and they had been inseparable. Izuku had felt like the happiest little boy alive. Everything changed when he was told he was quirkless. His father stopped sending money and abandoned them, his best friend became his biggest bully, and no one seemed to care. Izuku had dreamed of becoming a hero, but his mother did not believe in that dream, though she still loved and cared for him. Cal asked whether any teachers had intervened to stop the bullying. Izuku said they had not. Teachers had encouraged the bullies and dismissed his pleas for help as attention-seeking. Every adult he asked for help turned their back on him. He had to learn basic first aid just to get by, and even then the bullying worsened. He kept it from his mother because she already had so much to worry about. Then death threats began, and when his so-called best friend told him to kill himself on the same day a hero he admired crushed his dreams of becoming a hero, he had nearly given up. He could not follow through because of his mother, but then his mother died and he became an orphan. The orphanage where he was forced to stay treated him poorly, but he had nowhere else to go. Xylo expressed sorrow and sympathy, saying no child should have to endure what Izuku had. Cal confirmed that if Izuku touched his body, he could wake up. Cal explained they would teach him other methods over time, but that touching his body was the most basic way. Izuku said he had to return unless he was suddenly adopted by a nice family, which he did not expect. Xylo said they understood and that Banjo would lead him back to the orphanage. They would see him tomorrow. Izuku said goodbye and ran off with Banjo leading the way. Izuku returned to his body and woke up in time for no one at the orphanage to notice. He dressed and prepared breakfast for the other children. As everyone began to wake, a caretaker asked him whether he knew what had happened the previous night. Izuku said he did not. The caretaker said they had heard a noise like an animal in the basement last night. The caretaker noted that my window had been open and suggested there might be a little friend down below. Izuku muttered that this was just great. The caretaker laughed and warned that there might be a raccoon ready to attack me in my sleep. The caretaker then told me that now that I was done eating, I would have to do all the chores again unless I wanted to sleep outside in the dark, and she added that it looked like it might rain later. Izuku answered that he would comply. He thought to himself that he hadn't even touched his breakfast. Later, while I was doing the usual chores, a caretaker took me aside, shoved me into a closet and locked it. The staff did this whenever a family or an adult came to adopt because they wanted to keep me there until I turned 18. Cal walked into the orphanage and greeted the front desk. He announced that he was there to adopt. The caretaker invited him to follow her and asked what kind of child he wanted. Cal explained that he was looking for someone a little older with green hair because he had met a particular boy once and, upon discovering the boy was an orphan, had wanted to adopt him. The caretaker said that the boy had supposedly been adopted just yesterday. Cal pushed back and demanded to know where the boy was, insisting that he had seen the child outside only minutes earlier. He warned that he would take legal action if children were being harmed. The caretaker hurried off to speak with her coworkers. A few minutes later, the caretaker returned with Izuku at her side. Cal addressed Izuku and asked if he was all right. Izuku stammered that he was okay but did not seem to recognize Cal and asked if they had met. Cal reminded Izuku of a white dog they had met before. The reminder jogged Izuku's memory and he said it was great to see Cal again. Cal said it was good to see Izuku as well and reminded him that he had promised to get him out of the orphanage. Izuku confessed that he had not believed anyone would want him. Cal told Izuku that he and Xylo wanted him and that he would take care of the paperwork. After Cal finished the necessary paperwork despite a few caretakers trying to change his mind, he left with Izuku to his house, and Izuku's new life began. When Cal adopted him, Cal took Izuku to a house with a forested backyard. Cal explained that wherever he bought a house, it had to be close to the forest. Izuku asked why Cal's house was so close to the woods. Cal said it had to do with being close to his husband. Cal explained that Xylo had grown up in the woods and, although he could navigate the streets well, he always said the outside world felt like his true home. Xylo did not want to leave it behind, so Cal had bought a house near the forest so they could meet more easily. Izuku thought that the arrangement was kind. Cal was glad Izuku saw it that way and offered a quiet piece of advice. When you find love, sometimes it is hard, but if you hold on and the other person does not give up, you can make almost anything work. Cal then showed Izuku to his room and told him he would be staying for the time being. Izuku asked about training. Cal said they would start training later that night once their bodies were at rest and that Izuku needed to get used to his wolf half before they could do anything else. Izuku insisted that he was already used to it. Cal corrected him gently, saying that he could not rush things. Becoming comfortable with the wolf half took days and training, not just one day. Cal asked which high school Izuku planned to attend. Izuku worried briefly about whether he still wanted to go to UA. It was his dream school, but he did not want to run into someone from his past. He decided he would still try, because being a hero was his dream and he would keep following it. He told Cal that he wanted to go to UA. Cal asked why UA. Izuku answered that being a hero was his dream, and now that he had become a Wolfwalker, he felt he had a chance to follow it. Cal sighed and looked troubled. Izuku asked what was wrong. Cal explained that he and Xylo did not care for heroes and that there might be some issues they needed to discuss. He suggested they talk more at the wolf cave that night and told Izuku they should get his room ready. That night, Cal and Izuku shifted into their wolf forms and ran toward the pack cave. Izuku admitted that the wind against his fur felt exhilarating. When they arrived, Xylo approached them in his wolf form. Xylo greeted them, hugged Cal, and then welcomed Izuku to the family, remarking that it had been a while since they had raised a child as their own. Cal said it was time to tell Izuku their story. Xylo questioned whether Izuku was ready, but Cal explained that since Izuku wanted to be a hero, they should share their past to help him understand why they did not like heroes. Xylo agreed that seemed fair. Izuku asked who would begin, and Cal suggested they take turns with each telling half of their story. Xylo agreed. Xylo recalled that long ago, when quirks were new to the world, his mother had fallen in love with the wrong person and he had been born into a secretive line of Wolfwalkers. When that man discovered their nature, conflict erupted between both sides of the family, leaving Xylo alone. He was raised by his family's wolves and they moved frequently because people kept coming into the woods, hunting and threatening the animals that had become his family. Cal described his own childhood in the same turbulent era. He grew up in a home with his mother and an older sister after his father walked out when his little brother was born. He discovered a powerful quirk that allowed him to manipulate time and aspects of the moon, and terrified of the power, he hid it. As quirks began to appear across the world, the situation grew chaotic. The government started removing people with quirks from their families under the guise of study, and many of those taken were subjected to cruel experiments. Cal said he was lucky to have hidden his ability, but the visions he had seen of what happened to those children still haunted him. Xylo added that many people who had no quirks reacted badly to change. Some would betray anyone with powers for money, enslave them, or otherwise do them harm. He had been fortunate to be hidden deep in the forest. If he had been found, he imagined people would have assumed he was a frightened child and could have done terrible things to him. Cal explained that resentment exploded into open conflict between those with quirks and those without. A war broke out and many lives were lost. Cal lost his mother and brother in that time. His sister managed to escape but left him behind. Izuku reacted with disbelief and sympathy, and Xylo warned that the worst of the story was still to come. When Izuku asked their ages, Cal said they would get to that later. He then went on to tell how he had been running from pursuers and fled into the woods. Xylo remembered the day he first saw Cal. A group of men had been chasing him, and Xylo's pack could not stand by. In a flurry of fast-paced, anime-style action, the wolves intervened and scattered the attackers. Cal felt grateful for the rescue but also afraid of what might follow. He noticed Xylo watching, not in wolf form, and despite his own fear, Cal approached him. After talking, they became friends. Cal took Xylo out of the forest to show him the wider world, and Xylo returned the favor by sharing the beauty of nature. Cal teased Xylo about past relationships, and Xylo shivered at the memory. Xylo admitted he had been unlucky in love at first. Many of the people who dated him had ulterior motives, manipulating him and trying to control his life, at times putting him in danger. Cal said he had found it amusing then to watch Xylo's romantic troubles, though Xylo protested that Cal had his own problems, mentioning a persistent stalker who had once tried to kidnap him until Xylo stepped in and stopped the situation. They agreed that the tangent had taken them off track. Cal turned the conversation to a darker figure from the era. He asked Izuku if he had ever heard of someone who could take quirks from one person and give them to another. Izuku said he had not encountered anyone like that in his studies. Cal named the villain All for One, a man who sought power and control by stealing quirks from those who resisted and forcing others to join him. His followers hunted people with quirks, committing theft, abduction, and violent acts on his behalf. Izuku reacted with shock, having never read anything so specific in the histories he knew. Xylo added that some of All for One's henchmen had learned about Cal's quirk and had cornered him in Xylo's forest. A tense scene followed in which Cal was trapped by agents of the villain, and Xylo and his pack had to act quickly to protect their new friend. The encounter played out like an action sequence in an animated story: swift maneuvers, desperate escapes, and the adrenaline of narrow survival rather than any graphic description. A short pause filled the space where more details might have been, then the story continued. No one knew exactly what Cal's quirk was, only that it was powerful. Cal explained that they had been trying to take him to All for One, but the wolves had intervened to help. Xylo recalled that he had been in his human skin, gathering flowers for his cave and planning to grow his own, when he heard a cry for help. He ran to the noise and found people attacking his pack, people he considered family, and trying to seize Cal. Xylo lost control. Cal described the next part as something he could hardly speak about. The wolf that emerged from Xylo that day was not the same as the one people had seen before. It was larger, like a creature from a fairy tale, resembling the legendary hellhound. It moved through the attackers with overwhelming force and would not calm down. Cal said he did not know how he managed it, but before the creature could leave the forest, he had been able to knock Xylo unconscious, and that violent side of Xylo receded and was never seen again. Xylo woke up a week later with no memory of the event, and Cal had to tell him everything. Xylo said it had felt like a blackout. When Cal finished, Xylo admitted that the story reminded him of an old myth about the first Wolfwalker transforming into a monstrous wolf to protect loved ones and the pack. There had never been another incident like it, and the thought of what might have happened if Cal had failed still unsettled him. Izuku acknowledged the fear and asked if Xylo would have to deal with something like that again. Cal answered that the world was cruel in many ways and reminded Izuku that he had already endured a great deal at his young age. When Izuku asked how Cal and Xylo had come together, Cal explained that after the quirk war had settled, they grew older together. One day they found a lost child abandoned by his father because his quirk was considered too dangerous. The child had been only 4 years old, and Cal and Xylo could not leave him, so they took him in. During that time Cal made a deal. His quirk prevented him from aging past a certain point, and he did not want to live forever alone, so the agreement was that Cal would make Xylo immortal if Xylo turned him into a Wolfwalker. Xylo added that Cal did not want to be alone forever, and Xylo did not want to be the last of his kind, so he turned Cal into a Wolfwalker and they raised the child, Ricaro, together. They later took in another child who had no family, and the household became a large, happy family. Cal described Ricaro's quirk, called Chaos. Ricaro could produce storms, sandstorms, meteors, and control lightning and fire. His quirk also gave him a striking appearance: horn, red skin with golden lines, and dragon-like wings, but he was kind and respectful. The quirk extended his lifespan, and he lived for a very long time. He had family who still lived in Japan. Cal and Xylo visited them sometimes, but Ricaro had been given space to live his own life. Izuku asked whether they had turned Ricaro into a Wolfwalker, but Xylo said they had not. Their other son, Lychee, was different. His quirk, called Demon, gave him red skin, red eyes, pointed ears, horns, and a tail, an appearance many found frightening. He learned to be human sometimes, but his eyes could never fully change. He loved to fight and travel, and when he came of age he asked to become a Wolfwalker. After the change, he served as a hunter for them. Cal recounted the worst part. Heroes mistook Lychee for a villain because of his appearance and attacked him without checking. They did not try to understand him, and Lychee was killed in that confrontation. Cal and Xylo had heard his cries and tried to help and heal him, but it was too late. They lost him because he looked like a monster. Xylo reflected that society was broken. It was not simply black and white. Villains were not always born evil. Many were created by a world that gave no one a helping hand. People became villains because no one offered them a chance. Cal added that many heroes were similar, driven by fame and money more than true altruism. He argued that some heroes cared more about winning battles and looking good on camera than about the people who suffered or were left in orphanages. Izuku insisted that not all heroes were like that. Xylo acknowledged that some were different but warned that no one could save everyone, not even Izuku. He then asked whether Izuku still wanted to be a hero after hearing everything. Izuku affirmed that he still wanted to help and save people and to give them hope so they would not suffer the same fate he had. Cal agreed to help him but cautioned that it would not be easy. Xylo joked and laughed, then warned that the training would be demanding. Cal stopped him from going too far, and Xylo clarified that he had only been joking but that the training would be tough. He asked if Izuku was up to the challenge, and Izuku answered that he was ready. Xylo declared that Izuku's training would begin immediately. Later, after Cal and Xylo had told their story and started training Izuku, the regimen proved hard, but Izuku refused to give up. He trained with determination for 10 months and felt ready to enroll in the hero course, but then he ran into a problem. Izuku protested that he should be allowed to take the hero course, and Cal told him that he would first have to complete general education and work his way up from there. Cal told Izuku that going into general education was the best choice for him. Cal explained that he could see different timelines and that staying in general studies would help Izuku more than he realized. Cal warned that the hero course test was biased, that many people with good hearts and useful quirks were excluded because their abilities did not fit the test, and that the attention from teachers at the exam could make Izuku stand out. Cal pointed out that Izuku's combination of strength, sharp instincts, and healing would draw suspicion, and advised him to make friends who could have his back. Cal added that Izuku's old bully, Katsuki Bakugo, would be taking the test too, and Izuku was not ready to face him yet. Cal urged Izuku to be safe and to trust his plan. Izuku asked how he could still become a hero. Cal suggested the sports festival as the best path, a place where Izuku could prove himself, gain control over his emotions, and have time to prepare for facing his past. Izuku agreed to take general studies, still a little upset but trusting Cal's judgment. Cal reassured him that he and Xylo would help however they could. Izuku then went to UA and took the general studies entrance exam. He passed and walked toward the school feeling a quiet excitement. In class, Izuku took a seat at the back and waited for the teacher. A purple-haired student chose the seat next to him, and Izuku found himself noticing how attractive the newcomer looked. Izuku chastised himself for thinking that way, reminding himself he knew nothing about the student yet. When the teacher arrived, everyone introduced themselves and described their quirks. Izuku stood and followed his practice, introducing himself as Izuku Midoriya and giving his quirk name as Sleepy Wolf. He returned to his seat and watched the purple-haired student introduce himself as Hitoshi Shinso, with a brainwashing-type quirk. Murmurs spread through the room, and the whispers reminded Izuku of the bullying he had endured in middle school. He braced himself for a long day. At lunch, Izuku approached Shinso as the other student walked alone toward the cafeteria. Izuku introduced himself again and asked if he could sit with Shinso. Shinso hesitated because of his quirk, but Izuku assured him that having that quirk did not mean he would be used on him. Izuku reached out and took Shinso's hand to guide him to the lunchroom. They ate together while other classmates glanced and laughed. Izuku told Shinso to ignore them, and Shinso admitted he was used to it. Izuku revealed that his quirk had manifested late, leading others to believe he had none, and he described how cruel that had been for many quirkless kids. He said his adoptive father had helped him learn to control his ability and his emotions, and he wished the world were less harsh. Shinso said he understood. Izuku stood up to throw away his trash and then accidentally bumped into someone in the hall. Bakugo pushed him into a table and called him a quirkless loser. Izuku tried to explain that it had always been his dream to get into UA and that he would not bother Bakugo, but Bakugo grabbed his shirt again and used a bit of his quirk to intimidate him. Kirishima and Kaminari intervened and told Bakugo to stop. Shinso stepped forward and pushed Bakugo away from Izuku. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief and Shinso asked if he was all right. Izuku thanked him. Bakugo demanded to know who Shinso was. Shinso told him that it was none of his business and ordered him to leave them alone. Bakugo continued to taunt them, and Kirishima warned him to stop before someone got hurt. When Bakugo lunged at Shinso, Izuku felt something inside him snap. A powerful, instinctive aura flared around him. His posture changed and his eyes took on a fierce glow. The presence surprised everyone and paused the tense moment. Izuku stepped between Bakugo and Shinso, his voice low and warning Bakugo to back off and leave them alone. Bakugo froze in shock as his friends pulled him away, and a pro-hero arrived on the scene just in time. Izuku calmed down as Shinso guided them back to their table. Shinso asked who the aggressor had been. Izuku explained that Bakugo had been his bully and that his adoptive father had told him to avoid confrontations because his emotions could make him lose control. Shinso nodded, sympathetic, and Izuku confessed that, despite everything, he still wanted to aim for the hero course. Shinso expressed surprise at Izuku's ambition. Izuku confirmed that he was aiming for the hero course, determined to keep working toward that goal. Izuku thought he wanted to be a hero, but he worried there might be problems if he ended up in the same class as him. Shinso suggested they could become heroes together, and Izuku said he would like that. When the bell rang, Shinso and Izuku stood and walked together to their next class. After his first day at UA, Izuku went home and found Cal and Xylo sitting together, drinking coffee and chatting. Xylo nearly spat out his drink when he saw Izuku, and Cal looked surprised. Cal asked if Izuku's school day had just ended and how his first day had been. Izuku said it had gone well and that he had made a friend. Cal asked if Izuku had run into any trouble with the bully boy. Xylo teased Cal for skipping over the fact that Izuku had called them Mama Cal and Xydid, and Cal and Xylo both reacted with surprise. Izuku explained that he had found an old journal he believed belonged to one of their sons, Ricaro, and that the journal had used those names. He had called them those names because they were his legal parents and he had thought it would be okay. Izuku apologized for overstepping a boundary. Xylo reassured him that it was fine, only that they had not heard those names in years and were simply shocked. They told Izuku he could call them whatever he liked. Cal then asked again about the bully. Izuku sighed and said he had run into the boy at lunch. The boy had tried to pick a fight, and Izuku's emotions had gotten the better of him, causing his wolf side to surface. He said there had been no actual fight because the bully's classmates had pulled him back and Shinso had been there to calm Izuku down. Cal listened, and Xylo remarked that nothing could be hidden from Mama Cal. Cal asked why Xylo was there, since Izuku had thought he might be in the forest. Xylo explained that he liked to visit Cal because Cal was the person he loved, and he enjoyed hearing about Izuku's first day at UA, even if the two of them were not the greatest fans of heroes and villains. Cal told Izuku that training would start again the next day but that they needed to find a schedule that allowed him enough sleep. Cal reminded Izuku that this was his first day of high school and wanted him to relax before training resumed. Xylo asked where Izuku had found the journal, and Izuku said it had been in a pillowcase. Cal said Izuku could keep reading it and to let them know if he wanted to learn more about Ricaro and Lychee. They had many of the boys' things in the attic and could also visit Ricaro's family if Izuku wanted. Izuku admitted he had expected the topic to be difficult for them, and Xylo acknowledged that it was hard but reminded Izuku that he was their son too. Cal then asked Izuku what he wanted for dinner. Izuku asked for katsudon, and Cal agreed to prepare it together. The next day at UA, Izuku remembered how his parents had shown him more of the forest the previous night. Even though he had seen and heard much of it before, running through the woods with his family and pack had felt amazing and had reminded him that he was not alone. He felt reassured that he had people, wolves, who would support him when he needed them most. On his way to school he encountered a new problem. Reporters had gathered because word had gotten out that All Might worked at UA. Izuku thought someone must have spilled the beans. The reporters tried to stop him and peppered him with questions about the hero course and All Might. When he spotted Bakugo nearby, Izuku told the reporters that he was not in the hero course but indicated that Bakugo was, directing their attention toward Bakugo so he could get through. The reporters thanked him and went after Bakugo. Izuku noticed Bakugo's unhappy expression as he entered the classroom, and Shinso was there smiling. Shinso asked how things had gone. Izuku said it had been a nightmare and that he was angry at whoever had revealed All Might's presence. Izuku admitted he had thrown Bakugo under the bus to get into UA, which made Shinso laugh. Izuku protested that it was not funny and worried Bakugo would be furious with him later. Shinso reminded him that Bakugo deserved it and mentioned what Bakugo had done to Izuku in the cafeteria. Izuku sighed and said he hoped Bakugo would not come after him. The teacher arrived and class began. After the bell, the whole class went to lunch. Izuku got his meal, thanked the lunch rush service, and took his tray to his table. He could not help but notice that Bakugo was giving him a death stare. Izuku worried Bakugo would retaliate, and Shinso tried to reassure him, saying everything would work out and that between them he thought Izuku would win in a fight. Shinso reminded him that last time Izuku had almost lost control and gone fully into his wolf side. Izuku acknowledged it, uneasy but resigned. Izuku still needed to control that. The UA alarm then went off, signaling that someone was on campus. The sudden noise sent students into a panicked uproar that hurt his ears. He turned to see what was happening outside and realized the commotion had been caused by the press. Izuku forced himself to be loud and firm so everyone would listen. He told everyone to calm down and look outside, explaining that it was just the press. He was frustrated. The press had disturbed the school and the students had reacted like it was a crisis. Once people began to settle, he sat down and started eating. Shinso noted that he had not expected such a forceful reaction from Izuku. Izuku explained that the noise had hurt his ears and that he found it frustrating to see students behaving like that at a hero school. Shinso agreed, saying heroes should remain composed instead of panicking and trying to flee. When the bell rang, Izuku said they should head to class. He was worn out. Shinso agreed. Later, Izuku walked to school with a sore body after an intense training session the night before. He thought about the long training his guardian Zidid had put him through and the promise he had made not to tell Mama Cal. He suspected Mama Cal already knew, since her quirk made her attuned to time and routine. He felt a brief pang of guilt for keeping the training secret, but he also resented that Zidid had trained him without consulting Mama Cal. He entered the building and sat down next to Shinso as class began. During class, Shinso asked if Izuku had heard what had happened to Class 1A the day before. Izuku said he had not. Shinso explained that the class had gone on a field trip to a place called USJ to learn about hero work, but a group of villains had suddenly appeared and attacked. Shinso added that several students had been injured and a teacher had been rushed to the hospital. Izuku asked about the teacher's condition and Shinso said he hoped the teacher would be okay, adding that if All Might had not shown up in time the situation could have been much worse. Izuku responded sarcastically that this was great. Shinso pressed because Izuku had started acting oddly at the mention of All Might. Izuku sighed and began to explain. He recalled meeting All Might when he was still quirkless on a day that had changed everything. Bakugo had taunted him and told him to give up. On his way home, a villain had attacked him. All Might had intervened and carried him away. Izuku remembered jumping onto All Might's leg to ask a question and being lifted onto a rooftop, where All Might told him that someone without a quirk could not be a hero. That moment had shattered his dream into pieces. He had kept going for his mother, but later she had been lost in an attack involving villains. Between them, he suspected that the hero Endeavor had inadvertently played a role in her death. Shinso expressed sympathy and apologized for what had happened to Izuku. Izuku said he no longer liked All Might or Endeavor and would not care if they were suddenly gone. He then shifted the conversation to the upcoming sports festival, calling it their chance to become real heroes. Shinso admitted excitement and some worry, mentioning he had not trained much for the festival, but he hoped things would work out. Izuku invited Shinso to his house to train together. He explained that he had more than one father now, After losing his mother, he had ended up in an orphanage and had been adopted by the man he called Mama Cal, while another guardian, Zided, had been training him despite not being a big fan of heroes. Shinso asked why that was, and Izuku said that was not a story to tell casually. Izuku then asked if he could call Shinso Hito. Shinso agreed on the condition that Shinso could call him Aizu. They agreed to meet after school and walk home together. After school, Izuku led Shinso to his house, which was surprisingly close to the forest. Shinso remarked that he had not known Izuku lived so near the woods. Izuku explained that they trained in the forest because they could no longer use the beach. The cleanup had restricted access and they could not train in the house after an accident. Mama Cal preferred to keep the house tidy, so the woods had become their training ground. They unlocked the door and went inside. Izuku announced his return, and Mama Cal greeted him warmly, asking how school had been and noting Izuku had brought a friend. Mama Cal recognized Shinso as the friend they had heard about. Izuku flushed at the attention while Shinso and Mama Cal exchanged polite curiosity. Mama Cal told them that Zided was in the woods. She asked if Shinso would stay for dinner, explaining she needed a head count to cook, and Shinso happily agreed. Izuku pointed out that it was usually Zided's turn to cook, but Mama Cal said she would let him off since he would be training them both. Izuku explained that Zided's quirk made him aware of many things, sometimes in an oddly intrusive way. Shinso took it in stride, and the pair headed back out toward the woods to find Zided. While walking deeper into the woods, Izuku was jumped from behind. Shinso called out Izuku's name in alarm. Izuku laughed and told Shinso to stop, saying the wolf's playfulness tickled and that he would play with him later. Shinso asked if Izuku was all right. Izuku reassured him that he was fine and that the wolf would never hurt him. The dog-like creature barked in agreement. Shinso warned that it was a wolf. Izuku explained that he knew and that the animal was part of their pack. Shinso asked what Izuku meant by their pack. Izuku replied that his adopted father and he shared very similar, if not almost identical, quirks. He explained that it was rare to share the same quirk outside of blood relations. Izuku's quirk was called Sleepy Wolf, and his father's quirk was called Wolfwalker. Shinso recognized the name Wolfwalker from the legends his mother had told him. Izuku confirmed that their quirks were practically the same. Izuku then called to his father, Xylo. Xylo greeted Izuku and welcomed Shinso, surprised to see a friend. Izuku asked Xylo if he could train Shinso in hand-to-hand combat for the upcoming sports festival and the chance to get into the hero course. Xylo agreed, but told Izuku that after he taught Shinso some defensive techniques, Izuku would have to demonstrate the little trick they had been working on. Izuku hesitated and said it was difficult to fall asleep just by closing his eyes and that he usually needed aids. Xylo encouraged him, saying it was not impossible and that if Izuku mastered it, he could fall asleep and walk anytime he wanted. Izuku agreed. Xylo asked Shinso his name, and Shinso introduced himself. Xylo suggested they begin training. Time passed. Xylo taught Shinso ways to defend himself and how to fight back. Shinso showed steady progress and proved to be a fast learner. When Xylo decided Shinso had the basics down, he asked Izuku to perform the trick they had promised. Izuku protested, but Xylo insisted it was part of their deal and needed to see if Izuku was doing it correctly. Izuku sat cross-legged and closed his eyes. Shinso gasped when Izuku opened his eyes and had become a black wolf. Izuku realized with excitement that it had worked. It had taken a month of training to do it without aids, but he had finally managed it. Shinso remarked that it looked just like the legend. When Shinso asked about the Wolfwalker legend and Xylo's connection, Xylo confirmed that his name came from that legend and that his own ability allowed him to do the same transformation, which made training Izuku easier. A bell sounded. Izuku returned to his human form while Xylo went to grab a water bottle, announcing that dinner was ready. Shinso agreed to go. Xylo asked not to be called Sir and preferred to be called Xylo. Shinso and Izuku continued training with Izuku's family until the day of the sports festival arrived. As they walked into UA, conversation buzzed about the festival and everyone's hopes to become heroes. After class, most students gathered in Class 1A to see what they were getting into. Shinso asked Izuku if they had a chance. Izuku admitted his worries that if they failed at the sports festival, their chance to enter the hero course would vanish. Shinso told Izuku not to think like that and reminded him of Xylo's reassurance that everything would be all right. Izuku tried to hold on to that hope. When the sports festival began, many students competed and gave speeches. The first challenge was a race. Izuku and Shinso decided to split up so they would not get in each other's way. When the race started, everyone ran. Izuku was faster than most people thanks to his wolf-walking ability, and he could move even faster on all fours. As the contestants sped along, Izuku encountered hostile robots blocking the course and sensed something that smelled like explosives in the ground ahead. He disabled a robot with a swift, anime-style maneuver and then used a piece of broken metal from the machine to help him navigate a field of explosive devices safely. With a quick slide and a leap, he vaulted past the two racers in the lead, who happened to be Bakugo and Todoroki. Izuku took the lead for a time, but they caught up, and he finished in third place. After the race, Bakugo bragged about beating Izuku. During the next challenge, Bakugo became anxious when his score went over 10,000 and many people hesitated to join his team. Izuku invited Hito to join his team. Shinso agreed but noted that they still needed 2 more members. They then met Mei Hatsum, who preferred to be called Mei, and she joined their team, followed by Tokoyami. The 4 of them ended up forming a team, and when the timer went off everyone went after Bakugo's group. While the others were distracted, they used Dark Shadow to snatch unsuspecting people's headbands. When pursuers closed in, Shinso either subdued them mentally or Mei launched them away with her jetpack so they could escape. After the scramble ended, they learned the final challenge would be one-on-one. It so happened that Shinso and Izuku would face each other first. Shinso expressed confidence that Izuku would win, and Izuku proposed they fight without using their quirks so both would have a fair shot. Shinso agreed. When President Mike called them forward, they took their positions and waited. President Mike shouted for the battle to begin, and the two started exchanging strikes. The crowd murmured in confusion. The match had been announced as a quirk versus quirk battle, not hand-to-hand combat. President Mike called out that the challengers did not seem to be using their quirks and asked what was happening. Aweza suggested they were showing off hand-to-hand skills. Perhaps their quirks were not flashy and they wanted to test who was best without powers. Shinso moved with visible training behind his strikes. Izuku suspected Zydad had prepared him as much as possible before the festival. Izuku refused to lose, grabbed Shinso's arm, flipped him over his shoulder, and pinned him to the ground. Shinso tried to break free but eventually surrendered. Some in the stands cheered, though it was clear the audience had hoped for a different kind of fight. Izuku helped Shinso up and praised his effort. Shinso admitted he could have done better, and Izuku encouraged him, saying he had lasted this long and would likely win next time. They left the stage to prepare for the next match. The next opponent for Izuku was Todoroki. Shinso noticed Izuku's unease and asked why he did not look happy about the matchup. Izuku explained that Todoroki refused to use his fire side because he associated it with his father. Izuku did not care about his own win or loss as much as he wanted Todoroki to accept the fire as his own quirk. Shinso wished him luck. When the match began, Todoroki immediately used his ice to keep Izuku at a distance. Izuku dodged the attacks and commented that Todoroki seemed tired from relying only on his ice, and that using his fire side would make him stronger. Todoroki refused to use the fire. Izuku thought to himself that the quirk was his, not his father's, and wished Todoroki would realize that. Todoroki created a wall of ice and froze Izuku in place. Izuku closed his eyes and drifted into sleep. The announcers noted that Izuku had fallen asleep, and then the arena brightened as something unusual happened. Izuku's wolf form emerged and leapt into the fray, striking Todoroki and forcing him off balance. Spectators reacted in shock, and Aweza explained that Izuku's quirk was called Sleepy Wolf. When he fell asleep, his spirit manifested as a wolf that retained his strength and senses. The wolf moved across the ice and managed to free part of Izuku, who then returned to his body and woke up. He urged Todoroki again to use both sides of his quirk, insisting that if Todoroki wanted to be a hero he had to accept his own powers, fire included. Todoroki hesitated, then realized Izuku was right and activated both ice and fire. He remarked that if Izuku had not spoken up he might have won, but then he charged with everything he had. Steam and fog filled the battlefield as their attacks collided, obscuring the fight. When it cleared, Izuku lay unconscious from the impact while Todoroki stood breathing heavily and showing a few superficial scratches. The wolf spirit re-emerged briefly, looking shaken before fading away. Several people rushed in to carry Izuku out and take him to Recovery Girl while the rest prepared for the next match. A week passed since the sports festival ended, and internships were approaching. Shinso and Izuku had not secured placements, so they planned to train with Izuku's adoptive father. As they discussed the plan, the hero teacher Aweza, also known by his hero name Eraserhead, approached them. Aweza reminded them that they had not received internship offers because they were not yet in the hero course. Izuku explained their plan to train with his father. Aweza asked if Izuku's father was a hero. Izuku said his adopted father was not, but that he could still train them, pointing out how well their hand-to-hand work had gone at the festival. Aweza observed that it must have been Izuku's father who had taught them those techniques, and Shinso confirmed that was true. Izuku was surprised that Aweza was not a hero. Izuku was sure that, if he had been, he would be helping people left and right. Izuku explained that Aweza did not really like heroes. Aweza had told them that most heroes were like villains hiding behind masks and that villains existed because of the world they lived in. Aweza agreed that Izuku's adoptive father was not entirely wrong, then asked why the two wanted to become heroes and what kind of heroes they wanted to be. Shinso answered that both of them wanted to be underground heroes, and that he wanted to prove everyone wrong to show that people with villain-like quirks could become heroes too. Izuku said that becoming a hero had always been his dream and that he wanted to help people with a smile. Aweza said that they were in luck. He would take both of them on as his students for the internship. Izuku reacted with surprise, and Aweza added that he saw great potential in them. Shinso said they would tell their parents, but Aweza told them there was no need, since the principal and he had already sent letters to their guardians about the decision. Izuku asked when they would start, and Aweza said the internship began in a few days and they should be ready. Aweza left. After he left, Shinso collapsed in a heap while Izuku laughed at his excitement. Shinso praised Aweza as cool, and Izuku agreed. The internship with Eraserhead had arrived. Izuku was getting some things together at home when Mama Cal stopped him. Cal expressed happiness that Izuku's dream was about to come true and warned him to be careful. Izuku promised to be cautious. Cal told him to have fun with the internship and to tell Zaida that Izuku had said goodbye. Izuku left and headed straight for UA. When he arrived at UA, Shinso was already waiting. Izuku greeted him and asked if he was excited. Shinso said he was thrilled, not only because their dreams of becoming heroes were coming true but also because they would train with Eraserhead. Izuku agreed that it felt like a dream and urged Shinso to go find Eraserhead so the internship could begin. After finding Eraserhead, Aweza took them to a woods-like area on the UA campgrounds for training. At first Izuku thought they were in an actual forest, but different smells told him they were somewhere else. Aweza explained that he would be training them there for the duration of the internship and asked them to spar so he could assess how far their training had come. Shinso and Izuku sparred for several hours until Aweza called an end to it. Aweza asked Izuku if his adoptive father had taught him how to fight and whether Izuku knew how his father had learned those moves. Izuku confirmed that his father had a difficult childhood and had to learn to defend himself quickly. Aweza clarified that Izuku's father was not some type of hero, and Shinso added that he did not like talking about heroes and villains because, to him, they were two sides of the same coin. Aweza lectured them that the world was not simply black and white, and that people were not born villains but made into them. He reminded them of their desire to be underground heroes and said he would begin teaching them about his captured weapon the next day. He instructed them to get some rest because it was late and they had trained enough. Both boys acknowledged him and went to sleep. Night fell and almost everyone was asleep. In his wolf form, Izuku considered what training he could do when Aweza approached him and sighed, noting that Izuku's ability activated when he fell asleep. Izuku communicated that the transformation technically was not a quirk. Aweza asked what Izuku planned to do, and Izuku wrote in the dirt that he intended to scout the area and practice finding hiding places. Aweza agreed it was not a bad idea and reminded him to return before dawn. Izuku left to scout. Over the following days, Aweza taught them how to use his captured weapon, worked with Shinso on flexibility and balance, and trained them in shadow work and patrolling. One night, while Aweza was taking them through one of his portal routes for more training, Izuku began to feel very uneasy. Shinso asked if Izuku was okay, and Izuku said something felt wrong. Aweza asked what he meant, but Izuku closed his eyes and shifted into his wolf form. Shinso steadied his body as Izuku ran to the edge of a building and looked back at them. Shinso guessed that Izuku wanted them to follow, and Aweza agreed. Izuku led them to the source of the feeling and saw a confrontation with Nomus in progress. Aweza told them to stay put, but Izuku's unease would not let him. He gave Shinso a look and Shinso understood. Shinso said he would stay and guard Izuku's body to make sure nothing bad happened. Izuku moved toward where the fight was happening and found the hero killer Stain standing over a student, Tenya Ida. Izuku sprang into action and leapt at Stain, tearing at the student's suit to create a distraction while being careful not to touch the student's skin. Stain reacted in surprise and called out, bewildered at the sudden attack. Izuku growled lowly as Ida looked back, realization dawning on the student. Ida asked why Izuku was there. Izuku insisted that this was his fight. He stared down Ida and growled until Ida fell silent. Then Izuku turned to Stain, and the villain's expression sharpened as recognition dawned. Stain recognized him as the student who transformed into a wolf in his sleep and asked why he was here, suggesting it might be because of the hero standing behind him and warning him to move if he did not want to become another victim. Izuku answered with a low, powerful howl that made both Ida and Stain wince. Stain lunged. Izuku dodged, slipping and weaving as the villain struck again and again. A thrown blade cut Izuku's leg. A small trace of blood hit the ground, and when Stain came into contact with it, a paralyzing effect crept through Izuku. He froze in place, able only to make animal sounds. Stain moved to take advantage of him and turn his attention to Ida, but an oncoming spray of ice forced Stain to stagger back. Todoroki had arrived, having raced to the scene after hearing Izuku's howl. Todoroki approached quickly and checked on Izuku to see if he was all right. Ida demanded to know why Todoroki and the others were intervening, but Izuku's low growl shut down the protest. Todoroki made it clear that they were not going to abandon him. Stain sneered at the arrival of more would-be heroes, and the three of them held their ground. Aizawa appeared shortly after, having been searching for Izuku because Shinso had reported that he had run off. Aizawa and Stain clashed fiercely. While Izuku struggled with the lingering paralysis, Ida began to get back up. The fight continued until Endeavor arrived and together they subdued and detained Stain. Shinso joined the group on the scene. As the situation seemed to be stabilizing, a Nomu charged toward Shinso. Izuku threw himself in front of Shinso to push him out of the way, and the Nomu grabbed Izuku. He cried out as the creature's grip slammed him, and he suffered an injury that left him reeling. The hero killer attacked the Nomu, insisting that only All Might and Izuku could end it, but then he faltered and froze from overusing his own quirk. In the end, Izuku managed to return to his body and was taken to the hospital along with Todoroki and Ida. At the hospital they were reprimanded by the police. Ida apologized to the others for his earlier outburst. Two familiar figures arrived and quickly surrounded Izuku with relief. Cal rushed in and immediately checked on him, while Xylo, calmer, urged everyone to relax because Izuku was going to be fine. Xylo explained that his quirk allowed him to sense and anticipate possible outcomes, and he had known there had been a danger. Both parents expressed how thankful they were that the three of them had survived what could have been a far worse outcome. Todoroki asked how likely death had been in their situation, and Xylo answered that while it was not extremely high, there had been a serious chance and they had been fortunate. After insisting that the students get rest, Cal and Xylo left with promises to see Izuku after the internship. Left alone, Todoroki and Ida looked at Izuku with curiosity about his family. Izuku explained that Cal and Xylo had stepped in after he had lost his mother during a hero versus villain confrontation and had given him a new life. He said that they had helped him recover a sense of belonging. Todoroki admitted that his own family did not always show that kind of warmth, and Ida agreed that such families were not something he encountered every day. They all decided to rest before the nurse returned, and soon they drifted into the sleep they desperately needed. A month passed since the internship concluded. Classes had resumed and everyone was back, but Izuku and Shinso kept training together, with some help from Xylo at times. During that month Izuku found himself growing fond of Shinso and he worried about asking him out, afraid of being rejected. One afternoon at home, Izuku was lying on his bed trying to work up the courage to ask Shinso out when Cal knocked and came in to say that his friend had arrived. Cal urged him to hurry and get ready. When Izuku stepped outside he found Shinso waiting patiently. Shinso asked where they were going. Izuku said that he had found a charming cat cafe that served excellent coffee and suggested that the taste might impress even Aizawa. Shinso accepted with a small smile. They went to the cafe, ordered coffee and baked goods, and sat at a table as cats began to wander over and rub against Shinso. I felt sad that most of them avoided me like the plague. It was a lonely existence for a wolfwalker. Cats did not like us, so they tried to stay away whenever they could. Shinso asked if I was okay. I told him I was fine, just disappointed that none of the cats were coming up to me. Shinso reassured me that at least one cat would probably approach soon. I said I doubted it. We were called when our food was ready. We sat back down, and after Shinso took a sip of his coffee, his eyes lit up as he commented that the coffee there was amazing. I agreed. After eating and finishing our drinks, we decided to go to the park to talk more. We found a bench and chatted about random things until it started to get late. Shinso said he had fun. I said I did too, then told him I wanted to ask him something. Shinso asked what it was. I explained that we were growing close and planned to become underground heroes together, and confessed that I had been developing feelings for him. I told him I loved him, and that I would understand if he did not feel the same and hoped we could remain friends. I addressed him as Hito. Hitoshi reached out and kissed me, a gentle, tender moment. When we broke the embrace, he looked at me with his violet eyes and said he liked me too, admitting he had been afraid I might not feel the same way. I asked him to be my boyfriend, and he said he would like that very much and that soon we would not only be partners in life but also underground heroes together. In the end, we worked hard to become underground heroes. It was not easy, but as long as we supported each other, we could get through anything.